Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this special edition of Reputation Today PrimeTime with social media influencers. This edition of RT PrimeTime is presented in association with The Practice, a dynamic communications firm. Before we begin, I would like to mention and remember someone. This week, we lost a dear friend of the Indian PR profession. Anant Rangaswamy was a sales executive turned advertising person who then spent the last 15 years in journalism covering the marketing communications field as founding editor of Campaign India, later on editor of Storyboard on CNBC and Melt on Vine. We will observe a few moments of silence to pray for the departed soul and also to ask for grace that those whom he leaves behind will be able to deal with the loss. The Practice, in association with Reputation Today, unveiled the third edition of the social media influencers listing engine, better known as the Smile Report, yesterday. Today, we will look at a short video by the team that worked on this report on the methodology used and how they calculated the power grid of the influencers. This will be followed by a panel discussion with some communication leaders who feature in the list. Today's session with these leaders will lay focus on the social media influence of communicators. The panelists for the discussion today include Aparupa Sur, Communications Operations Manager at IKEA, Madhavan Narayanan, Senior Editor, Journalist, Writer and Commentator, Seema Ahuja, Senior Vice President and Head of Corporate Brand and Communications at Biocon, and Shekhar Das Chaudhary, Deputy General Manager, Corporate Communications at Mercedes-Benz India. The panel will be moderated by Nandita Mathur, Vice President for Content at The Practice. A warm welcome to all our panelists. I also welcome all those who have joined us live on YouTube today. Please tweet your learnings using the hashtag RTPrimetime and don't forget to tag our partner at TPR India along with Rep Today Mag. Let us now take a look at a short video which tells us more about the methodology used for the report. I would now like to welcome Nandita Lakshmana, founder and chairperson at The Practice, to share her thoughts behind the study. May we have Nandita on?
Thank you, Anubhuti. 3 years ago, we brought out the first Smile report. There was a space we found to spotlight members of the public relations industry who were using social media, their companies, their industries, and their own advantage. And we had the perfect tool to create a first of its kind listing that perhaps was the first anywhere in the world. There was one problem. I found myself featured in the list. It was embarrassing because I had an embarrassingly meager following, and by no means was I a social media influencer. After the launch, therefore, as we approached the second year, we decided that it was not enough to make a first of its kind listing, it was even more important to make it neutral and truly deserving. While the first list took Reputation Today's list of 100 top public relations professionals and evaluated their merit, we decided to bring in a stringent process that would also call for elimination. Being a stalwart in the industry necessarily does not make one a social media influencer. We also introduced another layer to our process last year by bringing in an advisory panel that would discuss the top 60 who made it to the listing and confirm their inclusion was based on merit and the process was closely adhered to. This led to interesting insights and improvements, one of which was opening Smile to nominations this year. But this is merely the start of our journey. As our industry evolves, it is only fair that our report also evolves. Currently, we are using only Twitter and LinkedIn for deriving our insights and data. However, we have noticed that Instagram is fast becoming a preferred platform for disseminating information and building brands. We've also heard many of you ask us about the inclusion of Instagram into the Smile report. Our goal for the coming years is to move from a two-pronged style of data collection and bring in a three-dimensional approach by incorporating Instagram or whatever is the trending social media platform into the mix. While influence can be established by counting the numbers of followers we have on various social networks, we also must recognize the need to determine how we are making those social connections, who those connections are, and what is being communicated. What matters is how often we spread our message, how far across the internet does our message carry, and if the audience trusts what we say. We need to accept that we as communication leaders must play the balancing act, that of someone who imparts knowledge and information, as well as that of a recipient. In this digital age of information overload, we must be cognizant that the knowledge we are sharing, conversations that we are starting and engaging in, and the brands that we are promoting are representative of who we are as individuals. And with that, the responsibility of being part of an industry that is a custodian of reputation, credibility, and goodwill. I believe this change in approach will bring about a whole new dimension to how we approach social media, responsibly, meaningfully, and ethically. We are delighted to present this year's Social Media Influencer Listing Engine Smile report, a list, not a ranking, of communication influencers who have created their niche online and are the absolute best that our industry of corporate communications and public relations has to offer. Congratulations to each one of you who are featured here. Your presence on the Smile listing allows many of us who are reluctant users or those who end up creating digital brands for others but ignore themselves. And that must happen a lot in our industry. Your presence in this list inspires us to do more on and with social media. Congratulations. Before we move on to the panel discussion, I would like to take a moment to thank our panel of experts who supported us in our calibration process. We truly appreciate the discussion and inputs provided by Karthik Srinivasan, Shravani Dang, Ritu Bararia, K.S. Narahari, and Ipshita Sen in the last 2 years. This has been an invaluable addition to Smile. I also thank the Reputation Today team, Amit Prabhu and Anubhuti Mathur, for their constant support throughout this project. Last, and certainly not the least, my colleagues at the practice who asked tough questions, upended the methodology, and have assiduously focused on neutrality and merit. Anirban Tiwari, Abhishek Sen, and Samir Rajdania, who brought this wonderful report out for the third time, third consecutive time. We congratulate everyone on this year's Smile List for being at the forefront of our industry. May I now invite my namesake, Nandita Mathur, to take the panel discussion forward. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Nandita, for those lovely words and for telling us more about the Smile report. I'm so happy to welcome all the panelists to this discussion today, and a very good evening to all of you. And may I start by jumping straight into the discussion and begin with the first sort of question which I want to put to all of you. Being communicators in your own right, how do you see yourselves as influencers? Do you actively work towards being an influencer? If I may start with you, Aparupa.
Thank you, Nandita. And first, to start with, it's great to be a part of this panel and to have such insightful discussions. So, thank you for having me over. To start talking about influencers, social media has added a whole new dimension to the concept of communication. There are numerous ways to communicate with people through pictures, tweets, links, blog posts, videos. The choices are endless today. So, as a communicator, we are responsible for creating and growing our brand's voice and also our own persona. So, yes, in a sense, we are all influencers, I guess. And this could be through various methods, thought leadership, advocacy, showcasing your life's choices, discussing live and relevant topics that grab attention and also drive people to interact and share. So yes, so we are influencers. I wouldn't say that I actively work towards being an influencer, but yes, I do actively work towards creating an effective communication and also create meaningful and authentic content. So that's where I'm at. Thanks, Nandita.
You're on mute, Nandita.
Seema, if you could share your thoughts.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. And once again, I would like to thank Rep today as well as the practice for inviting me for this panel discussion today. So, before I really come to what I do as an influencer, I think what is important for us is to really understand that we are living in the age of digital revolution today. And if you look at collectively today, there are about 5 billion active users on various social media platforms. And reports suggest that nearly 10 new users are being added every second. So if you look at these data points, it tells us the influence that social media has in shaping mindsets and bringing in culture change is immense. So, as communicators, I think we need to play a very important role in using social media for building brand reputation, acquiring new customers, launching new products, building customer loyalty, etc., etc. And as communicators, I think we can be the best influencers for our brand. And I tell you why I say that. I mean, if I was to give you an example of Biocon, which is a life sciences and pharma brand, and we all know that the kind of regulatory framework that we have globally doesn't really allow us to use paid influencers who could be doctors or patients who are actually our customers. So in this backdrop, as communicators, we need to play the role of influencers. And we need to use social media extensively to narrate corporate brand stories, to build trust with the brand. And this is what I personally do. So, as an influencer, my role is to build authentic, relatable content that tells the brand story. And my role is also to correct fake negative news that may emerge on various social media channels by providing authentic information. And my role is also to generate positive conversations for my brand and build a network of our genuine followers. So, in short, I would like to say that, it is very important for us as communicators to build reputation for the brand, and which is where we can be very effective influencers for our own brand.
Right.
Thank you.
So both you and Apurupa spoke about, authenticity and, reputation and building a strong brand through social media. So, Shekhar, if I were to come to you, since you represent Mercedes, uh, how do you see yourself as an influencer?
I think thanks, Nandita. I think to begin with, I see myself more as a learner and observer of social media, and I'm very pleasantly humbled to find myself as a influencer and in the August company. But I think I support one and agree with what Seema and Aprupa has said. As communicators, we are an extension of the brand to our audience, and I would say that we are one of the most credible brand face to the brand, and the followers, whatever we have, they expect credibility, honesty, and authenticity, both at a individual level and also as a custodian or communicators. And since we live the brand each day, we also play a significant role in not only in brand building, but also this is beyond just being transactional on social media. We uphold those values that probably the brand that we represent. And our biggest influence, which Seema also said, is that there are stories. There may be legacy brands, there are the new age ones, but every brand has a very specific story behind them. And our key role, if I can say, is to communicate those stories in a very interesting and novel manner to our individual communication audience. I think that should is the biggest contribution or influence that we have in our role.
Right. Thank you, Shekhar. So, Madhvan, you are unique in this panel in the sense that you are a former journalist, a writer, and so maybe your experience may be slightly different. How do you yourself see yourself as a former journalist now using social media, and do you see yourself as an influencer? You have a huge following on Twitter. So
Well,
definitely, in that respect, you are an influencer. But tell us more about that.
let me thank you first for having me here. I mean, I'm the odd one out, and I was going to actually start by saying that I'm not on the smile list, and I'm thankful for that because although it's great to have pleasant people from the brand communication and public relations community around me, for a journalist, it's always a bit too different because you are the nature of influence that a journalist has, or a thinker has, or a writer has, is qualitatively different or ought to be from a typical brand communicator because we are not advocates, we are like judges. So I call often media, news media, as and even writers as the social judiciary. So that way we are qualitatively different. Having made the disclosure, I must also say that I'm not. I'm officially listed in the Pinstorm list of influencers among the top 200 in India, mainly with my Twitter following. Although I'm also on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn. And although I did not formally, to answer your question at the beginning of the panel, that although I'm not, I began as a journalist. Essentially, I loved communicating my thoughts as well as sharing news when I was in Hindustan Times. It began like that. I have emerged, and I like that way because I'm also growing older. To be seen more as a writer and a thinker than a news gatherer or a news presenter. Although, so um, influence can be in many ways, and I think what all the other panelists have said before matters. But I kind of compiled a formal list for a peculiar reason. I said, why am I here today with the public relations and communication professionals from the brand community? Because I've always seen them as uh, behind the scenes people in the communication because I've had decades of experience in the mainstream media. Now, the interesting thing is, as the Smile report shows, when it comes to social media, the brand community are fellow travelers and not drivers of where mainstream media people are the passengers. Okay, so that brings me to a checklist of things that I have got. Each of us is potentially a journalist today. The moment you share a news, you're a journalist. uh, the moment you share a video or anything, you're a publisher. So we are all have multiple identities these days. But what distinguishes us is not only our uniqueness in the personality, but also uh, our character in terms of our soft skills also matter even on social media. That is a very important takeaway. That is where I feel brand communicators typically become what I call the influencers influencer. Somebody can come to me on Twitter. I might have a much larger reach. Somebody from your Smile report might have a smaller reach, but because I recognize that person in a certain way, I can actually be influenced by that person more than anybody else. Let's say a typical follower. So to that extent, the influencer becomes a very important point in this. So I have compiled a list of 6 C's and 4 R's, which can help us locate ourselves within the quadrant that you've drawn up in the Smile report, or whether you're an aficionado or a maestro or a whatever. So, for instance, you have content and communication, comment, conversations, contact, and credibility above all. These are the six C's I see. And on the what we do with those six C's is reputation, reach, recall, and relevance. So these what I call the four six C plus four or formula can help you locate. Each of us will score in, high in some of these and low, not so high in some of the others. But that helps us locate ourselves within what I call the social media map. You know, because this is a peculiar thing. Because in a typical court of law, the judge will be sitting on a pedestal, and the lawyers or the advocates will be arguing. But in a brand related influence community, everybody is seemingly seated in the circle of equal, but each person has a different personality. Therefore, it helps us to score ourselves in the 6C plus 4 formula as I see it. And as a journalist, I would obviously have to rank high on credibility, comments, and conversation, and that is where, and content, of course. These are the four things that I bring to the table, which results in at least three of the 4 R's. But it's very important to understand intersectionality of personalities in this. A music lover may be a PR person, but the music itself may bring more followers and bring a pleasant contact, which can help influence. So intersectionalities are very vital. I hope that helps. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Madhavan. That was quite detailed. So, Seema, you made a very interesting point saying that, because of the lack of regulation, you cannot use paid influencers. And in that sense, you yourselves are like an influencer for the brand. So, tell me, for Biocon, you represent Biocon, which is a great innovative healthcare brand. What is the kind of social media mix that sort of allows you to amplify messages more effectively? Is it a combination of LinkedIn and Twitter, or is it do you also use Instagram?
Yeah, so as a brand, we have a presence across different social media platforms. And of course, LinkedIn and Twitter are more important for us because that is where we find our audience. But let me also tell you that, I mentioned to you that, we as communicators have to work as brand influencers. But another very interesting piece that we have found and we are using effectively is that we use our genuine followers as our influencers. So if you look at the whole influencer industry, the way it works, most of them are paid influencers, and that also sometimes leads to the discussions whether it is really ethical to have paid influencers. But that is for another thing. But in our case, what really has worked is that we have certain very genuine followers who relate with us and who believe in the story that we are telling, and who are aligned with the purpose that with which we are driving our business. So these genuine followers also work as influencers for us because they generally support the cause that we are promoting. In terms of channels, as I mentioned, in Twitter and LinkedIn are very important for us, and you would see that most of our corporate, developments and news, etc., they get broken on these channels. And we also make it a point that we are narrating brand stories which are authentic. For example, we this beginning of this year we had launched a campaign called She Inspires. So that was actually narrating very inspirational stories of our own women in science. Now, 3 years ago, we had launched this campaign called Women in Science, where we were focusing on, on celebratory women from across the world. But this time, we stepped up the campaign to talk about our own women in science. So that kind of engaging content, when you share on your social platforms, it really gets you very good engagement. So this campaign itself got us about over a lakh of views. So to each its own, every brand has to really decide what their brand strategy is and what their social media mix is. But ultimately, it boils down to very strong content, which gives you an
Right,
opportunity to engage with your
right.
people.
Great. So, Apurupa, what about IKEA? Because do you use a lot of Instagram because showcasing your products and maybe furniture or whatever it is, or what is the kind of social media mix that IKEA uses?
So, for IKEA, which is a global home furnishing brand, it is important for us to understand how each medium works, and we optimize each medium accordingly in a right manner. For example, we use LinkedIn to talk about our global footprint, our thought leadership, our sustainability initiatives, our people and culture initiatives. What IKEA as a brand is doing for the community. Various home improvement projects, skill development projects. How are we working closely towards reducing the carbon footprint? All these good initiatives that we are doing all over the world and in the country, so which spreads a positive message about the brand, and which actually really talks about the brand in a way that it is a brand for tomorrow. It is a brand that supports the people and the planet. So these are some positive messages that we sort of talk about in LinkedIn, which we are doing globally. Also, our co-workers are our biggest ambassadors. They talk about their life and their work experience in IKEA, all the inclusivity, the diversity that we have in the organization, and how IKEA has helped them develop themselves as professionals in their career, right?
Right.
So that is what we use LinkedIn a lot for. And of course, a lot of conversation about what is the future looking like, right? Then on Facebook and Instagram, those which are more visual mediums, we talk about our range, our various products, how do we use our products, because our products are different and intelligent, and they are multifunctional, right? So we talk about them. We talk about the fact that our affordability and value for money, because we want to talk about the fact that our range is really value for money and is for the many people. So that's what we use Facebook and Instagram for. Very, very visual. We talk about our campaigns, we talk about our promotions, and the audience is very different. And Twitter we use for live updates and events. Like we had our CEO meeting the Karnataka Chief Minister at Davos at the World Economic Forum. So we talk about those live topics there. So this is how we sort of segregate at different mediums. Yes. Thank you.
Interesting mix. What about you, Shekhar? High-end luxury, swanky cars. What does work? What works for you?
I think not very different from what Aparupa said. As a luxury automotive brand, we use social media for multiple purposes, ranging from engaging with the automotive enthusiast. Majority of them are also press. Some for creating chatter around the brand, creating a strong buzz around the new product launches, which is always the key pillar for the automotive industry. While in some of these platforms we make corporate announcement, like for sustainability or any future strategic goal, mostly in LinkedIn. We also share our roadmaps, uh, but we use mostly LinkedIn for showcasing the talent, the organizational culture, and primarily to attract the future employees, all the young brand advocates and the admirers of the brand which are there. And for Instagram, I will say it's purely a brand building exercise where you see very high quality, very aspirational images of the products, that are associated with the star. So it's a mix. And also YouTube is important because what we have seen is most of the, as you know, that most of the potential customers, even before they head to the actual physical dealership, they have already decided, research online, they have seen the YouTube videos. So that way YouTube plays a very important role. But what is most important is social media has given us that opportunity where it's more of a two-way street, and we try to focus on what not we want to do for the customers, rather what customers want, or what are their wishes and expectation from the brand. So I think social media has given this channels all has given that opportunity, and we have been using that. And probably the pandemic has accelerated the digitization. We hear a lot about adaptation of digitization in the automotive field. The brick and mortar model still stays, but a lot of this digitization or acceleration has happened in the last 2 years.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid point that you've made, Shekhar, that COVID has sort of accelerated digitalization, which in turn has, sort of accelerated the use of social media. Now, many of you spoke about, paid influencers, and this is, one of the sort of big issues with social influencers. That if it is paid, how credible does it, and is it, and does it sort of take away from the credibility of a brand? And secondly, I also wonder, that if it's paid, what are the boundaries brands must draw, and what is it that an influencer, now all of you are influencers, what you need to keep in mind, you have to observe certain ethics and, propriety. So what are some of the issues that come with, being uh, paid influencers? And also, recently, ASCI had taken down some of the ads, cryptocurrency ads in particular, because they were violating the guidelines which they've come out with. It doesn't say paid promotion, it doesn't call out that this is a risky product, and so on. So when there is a lack of regulation, what is it that we can do to sort of, address this issue of paid influencers? Madhavan, if you could sort of uh, start. Madhavan, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hello. Can you hear me now? Yeah.
Yes.
Um, Let me begin by saying that I occasionally take up paid engagements as an influencer, but I state the rules very clearly. First of all, I more usually make a disclosure about if there is a promo, or I put out a general tweet saying that I might be putting out tweets which are paid. But having said that, I tell the brands upfront that I will not endorse brands, meaning
Mm-hmm.
I do not want any endorsement which will, let's say, raise eyebrows in the rival brand. Okay, nor would I do anything that would unduly involve a selling of a product to a gullible customer or anything. So, since I'm considered a thought leader, I do more of what I call concept related conversations that might incidentally help the brand, in terms of concept of business development rather than core product value. So it's very important to understand that social media offers dramatic potential for brands in terms of um, uh, the genuine original definition of the brand, which is about reputation and quality, and not reach and recall. So, but recall and reach are part of the game even now. But as a journalist who has seen lots of media, including newspapers and magazines, I find that conversations and shared content can replace what in the good old advertising era used to be called infomercials or advertorials. So information rich content can help do something which advertising can't for brands, like a YouTube video or anything. So to that extent, I find that an influencer credibility is enhanced by the richness of the content, the reasonable neutrality, and disclosure where applicable, which sets the boundaries for paid influencers while exploiting the potential. But I must also add that there are various categories of paid influencers. And let me, if I have the, if you allow me, mention that my current role is of a writer. I've just got my first book out, which is a translation of a Tamil novel into English, published by HarperCollins. And the publisher has been using Instagram influencers very effectively because many of them are book lovers who like to read books and review them. And I find that one of the reviewers gave a very objective review of my book, mentioning the parts that she liked and she didn't like, which basically meant the influencer was not artificially told to hype anything out. The person got a freebie, okay? Now, yeah, I have been influenced by, I mean, I'm also an influencer on cinema or music where directors or filmmakers or music publishers get in touch with me. I give them the honest opinion. I don't charge for it, but I do get, let's say, free movie shows or whatever. But
Right.
the interesting thing is there are various layers in which you can maintain credibility through, as long as you're not told to carry the message, or a specific passage or forbidden from certain things, I feel the credibility remains. And after that, it's essentially a conversation between an influencer and a brand. And some rules of engagement and disclosures are the best way to take it forward.
Right. Yeah, I think disclosure is should always be there. Seema, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I agree with what Mr. Madhavan has said, that the credibility of the influencer actually boils down to how authentic they are. And what I mean by that is that if you are really expressing opinion which is genuine, you're experiencing the brand or the service, and you are sharing that, then it is not really a forced communication that you're doing. That shows up, and that is very very important for the influencers, to display authenticity, likability, and capability, and that is how then they can actually help and building trust with the brand that they are representing. And I was reading somewhere that the number of influencers is really on the rise. I mean, if you look at this, the market grew from 1.7 billion in 2016 to about 13.8 billion in 2021. So clearly, this is working for brands, and this is the way forward. And the influencer marketing is here to stay. Thank you.
Right. Shekhar, what about you? What do you think of paid influencers and how can it be sort of regulated?
Yeah, Nandita, various companies, I mean, they have different strategies and approaches to reach their audience. And of course, paid influencer is one tool. But as I said in my last statement, that with social media, it's more important what the audience or the customers expect or wishes from the brand rather than what you want to do for them, right? So that's how exactly the entire scenario of marketing with influencers step in. Here I completely agree with both Madhavan and Seema that the most credible part as communicator is that there has to be the disclosure or the labeling. You may be sending or giving the end consumer some content, but the transparency should be there in every context. The customer should be knowing that whether it's paid or it's organic content. And as communicators, it will always be our forte and preference that we always generate organic content. But very important also is the fact that brands must, and I'm sure for everyone, there are very stringent global guidelines related to ethics and integrity codes. And while engaging with any of this paid content, there cannot be any compromise in terms of whom you are choosing as an influencer, the background, and the same lies for the influencer also when you are endorsing or promoting a brand. So ethics, guidelines, and disclosure are the, I think, three key important pillars. No harm in getting into paid influencer, because if the customer or the user wants it, we might as well listen to what they want.
Right, right. Apurupa, what about IKEA? Do you use paid influencers?
So, Nandita, actually at IKEA with us, we have been having this a constant debate about whether do we want to get engage paid influencers at all or no, because so
Right,
far we've only seen organic engagement. The influencers, they come to the store, they cover the range, they make reels, they talk about it. A lot of them are really really funny, and they've gone viral, and they're all organic, right? But we have been sort of discussing the scope, because we are cognizant of the fact that there is the whole community which is there, and the community is growing, like Seema mentioned, and it's growing exponentially. And then also there is a need, because the traditional media versus this, there has to be a balance, right? So people are engaging more, people are talking more with influencers. So how do we effectively leverage them, right? And also be authentic at the same time. So there is a whole breed of influencers who will put the bottle of a product up, and talk about the fact that this is this and this is what it is, and that it's not genuine, that it's something which has been given to them and they're just promoting it.
right,
So being cognizant of the fact that, okay, there is a community which is there, and they are also, this is a career for them, and a lot of our influencers are experts in subject matters. So what we as a brand would like to do eventually is to understand who are these influencers who are experts in the subject matter, like home decor or furnishing, and how can we leverage them. And of course, being very authentic. Not, we don't want to tell anyone, post this, post that. I mean, that is just completely not in line and in sync with our brand. We want to engage them, we want to engage them effectively, and of course with proper labels that this is a paid opportunity and this is a collaboration, whether
Right.
it's a barter or something. And then they talk about it as experts in their own field, what they are experiencing in IKEA store. What do they like? Do they like the store? Do they like the products? How did they like the Swedish meatballs? It's their experience which they talk about. So this is how we are looking at leveraging authentic experiences and products, even though engaging with the paid community. But the debate is still on with us, and we are still organic. We will see when we decide to actually leverage this.
Yeah, I think this
Yes.
debate is sort of unending, and there's like a fine balance one brands
Yeah.
and companies need to maintain, and it can go on and on, right? So moving on, social media is also known for online bullying, fake news, trolling, fake tweets, manipulation, and so on. So as influencers, how do you sort of perceive your role in this kind of a scenario, and what can sort of influencers do to counter all of this? Madhavan, if I can start with you, because you are your own brand in a way, and so how have you faced trolling and things like that, and how do you sort of deal with that?
It's a very interesting question because I was thinking about it, and I suddenly realized that I get trolled for stuff, but it is mainly political. Okay, but I also have a lot of, I dare say, credibility as well as following on issues related to technology and business and culture and life, which I do not usually face much trolling. So it's almost as if there are two people, two sections of my personality that come. But strangely enough, I think what happens is that when you handle a troll well, your influence goes up. Okay, we can do it through humor. We can do it through what I call better articulation, where you can call out a person not just in noise, but in terms of uh, credibility through logical arguments. And rarely, only because abuses become so common, you can use blocking as a technique. But essentially, the basic rule in social media engagement is that you may be officially talking to a person X, but actually it is not meant for that person's benefit, but for the benefit of others who are listening in. So third party listening is a very critical component in social media engagement, because some people are out to be rude and get at you, but the world can see what they are. Your job as an influencer is to prove what they are with in no uncertain terms by using a combination of, it can be anything. It can be charm, it can be credible logical argument, it could be just a piece of content thrown at them to shut them up because they know, it's like saying, it's like a move on the chessboard. So, as far as fake news is concerned, it is a very completely different debate, although it's highly related to what we are discussing today. It takes us into probably it requires a separate discussion. But from
True.
brand perspective, although I would expect brand communicators themselves to be the front soldiers in tackling any fake news related to their own industry or brand. Okay, so they are the soldiers, but a journalist or an independent person or a follower endorsing that and amplifying it dramatically enhances the what I call the uh, troubleshooting engagement of the brand. Last but not the least, let me say, although you did not mention it yourself, I find that consumer brands, mass consumer brands particularly, have a huge issue to tackle on social media because customer complaints, it's now become almost default that CRM happens on social media in many ways. Oh, so I find, for instance, I was scandalized recently. Let me name the brand, ICICI Bank. They got back to me when I said something. A lot of followers jumped in to support me because they were similar experiences. The ICICI handle says hello to me, and then after that they simply start communicating. when I shared the information in a private message, they did not communicate because I don't go out to harm brands just for the heck of it. I don't use bully tactics. But even I take the conversation private the moment I know they are responsive. But if after that they don't respond, then things become called out. I didn't do it in this particular instance, but it depends on every consumer. So I find that brands need to also have the big R called response, which I did not put in my earlier thing. Responsiveness is a very critical component. I find that most of my fellow panelists have been discussing content extensively, but content is also belongs to the pre-digital world. Conversations and interactions are so critical that you need to engage special bandwidth of your mind on how to steer that, because there are great opportunities and threats. Conversations are to social media what futures and option are to stock market behavior. You may not like it. You can't say I'm a long-term investor when F&O offers you hedging options. So you need to know how to engage conversations and interactions with a combination of charm, credibility, and content, which is where I feel that a lot of brand communicators are still falling short. I can give you positive case studies because of my experience, but today is not the occasion. I deliberately named because I believe that don't go on the social media if you're not ready to have a conversation.
Right. Shekhar, would you like to respond to some of what Madhavan said? And particularly, I mean, in your experience, have you come across this kind of, I wouldn't say fake news, but social media does have a downside to it. So, as influencers, how do you think you could sort of counter that?
No, I agree with what Madhavan says. In terms of fake news or trolling, I think we as communicators we have to pick the mantle, and we are the foot soldiers, trying to go and find out and take things offline as much as possible. In terms of trolling also, I think it's better if you know that it's trolling, it's better you stop responding. But more importantly, which Madhavan mentioned, as a consumer facing brand, is how are you communicating or engaging with your customer. And I totally agree that content is not everything. How fast, how responsively you are communicating to your customer, whether it's a complaint or a brickbat thrown at you, I think how quickly you can address that. I think that is something very important, which we as communicators also do. And the idea would be to, of course, take it offline. And it's my personal opinion that one-to-one relationship or conversation always help, and you try to satisfy it and find a solution to that, so that this conversation doesn't go on showing, expressing in online world. So that's the key benefit. And of course the use of wit is very important, use of humor is very important. But
Right.
we definitely are in the in the front line, and we should take up the mantle when such situation arrives. And
Right.
also, one probably last thing is, every organization, again I go back to ethics code and integrity code, you have very strong ethics and integrity code. And if you think your social post has had stated something which you believe in, in the organization, that you just stick to that. You may be trolled for that, whatever, but then if you have that belief, you should definitely stick to that. That's something we, or I personally believe.
Right. Seema, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, very interesting conversations we are having. So, let me first give you an example on the responsiveness piece that Mr. Madhavan just mentioned, and I agree with him. Brands who are on social, they need to have a process where they respond to conversations almost in real time. And I tell you, as a life sciences brand, how we are doing it is that we have a very robust monitoring system, and there are people who are 24/7 monitoring, conversations on different channels. And how we really use it very effectively was during the pandemic time, and there was such a scarcity of medicines, and there was nothing available to treat COVID, and then doctors were prescribing whatever medicines. And during that time, we had repurposed one of our novel biologic, which was being used by COVID patients who were hospitalized. And we used Twitter and LinkedIn and all these channels very extensively because there were requests coming in from different parts of the world, where different parts of the country, where the medicine which was prescribed to them was not available. And because they had read about what we had, so they were all reaching out to us through different mediums. And there was a team of warriors who were set inside our company, and we were making sure that any patient or any caregiver who was reaching out to us, even if it was not for our product, we were enabling them to get to the medicines that they wanted. So that was an extraordinary time. But otherwise, also on a day-to-day basis, if you look at, we do get a lot of customer queries on Twitter or on LinkedIn, sometimes on Instagram as well, where people reach out to us and tell us that they're not getting certain products somewhere. Sometimes these are genuine requests which we reach out to, and we address it and make sure that the product gets to the patient where it is needed. Sometimes it is incorrect also. I mean, if I was to give you an example, last month, and that was somebody from the media fraternity, and she had sent out a tweet, telling Biocon that your distributor has taken a product, has been paid for a product, he hasn't supplied a product, and she gave name of the product. Now that product was not being made by us, so we had to correct that perception that she had, and within 1 hour we sorted that out. We figured that out who was making that product, and we reached out to her and we told her that this product is not made by Biocon. This is made by some other company. We have a substitute. So if you are not able to get that product, and if your doctor allows, gives a prescription for our product, we'll be more than happy to get a person to reach you, because it was a very critical. Her dad had had, I think, a renal transplant, so it was very critical at that point in time. So it's very important for, and especially companies like ours, to be, very, very sensitive and compassionate, and of course, responding in, on time is very, very important. Talking about the troll behavior, we encounter trolls also on a regular basis, on our some of our social channels. And I think if you look at, there are two kinds of groups on on social. One of them are, these are the paid trolls, who actually don't have any reason to say what they're saying, but they're doing their job. So, as a policy, we tend to ignore, these trolls who don't have a face and they hide behind a fake entity or whatever. But whenever we see that there is genuine feedback and genuine, complaint, etc., coming in, we do take it up. But in general, if we find that these are the cartons of trolls who are just creating negative conversations, then we use our positive stories to deflect the issue. And sometimes if things are not based on facts, then we also try and correct them by giving the factual position. So that is a role that as communicators we have to do, which is very, very important, I say.
Yeah, I know that is very interesting, Seema. Thank you for sharing all those examples. Just shows the power of social media and how it can be sort of leveraged. So I see that we have about 8 to 9 minutes. So just to wrap up the discussion, which can sort of go on endlessly, but and it's been very meaningful. So as a takeaway, to the audience, I just want to ask you one question. Your presence on the Smile listing and your, as being part of this panel, as being social media influencers, how could you motivate your, colleagues from the PR and the communications industry who end up creating brands for themselves, but in the process ignore themselves? They're reluctant to get onto social media. How could you, you could share a couple of tips to encourage them to become influencers and be in a position to amplify the cause of the sector? If we could start with you, Aparupa.
Nandita, interesting question. I guess the more the merrier, I guess, in this field, because I think today we need more and more content creators and communicators who are influencers, and influencers in a positive way, where we are talking about the right things, driving the right causes, taking up the mantle and sort of ownership of putting out the genuine information out there, because like we discussed before, that there is a lot of fake information, there's a lot of trolling, bullying which is going on social media. So as communicators, yes, we should, and we need to play a very responsible role. And we should encourage our peers and colleagues, to start talking about a genuine topic of interest, be an expert in a certain topic or certain field, whichever interests them, start researching, start putting out information in social media. They are building various brands, but like you said, that they ignore their own brand, right? So who are they as people, who are they as personas? Do we know more about them? What do they do? What can they build on? And also, when they are on one side of a brand, they know the brand more, right? They know what is the brand talking about, what does the brand stand for, to propagate that as well in a right manner, to encourage others. I think that's something that we need to build a community. We need to sort of pull each other up to do more, to be out there more. I think a lot of us still don't know the power of social media, and I think we need to
If
sort of,
I just interrupt you for a second,
yeah, yeah.
they do know the power of social media, but it's just a general reluctance to get onto social media and to maybe tweet or to do
Yeah,
all
yeah,
that.
for them, I'm
Yeah.
I'm saying
So,
what the social media can do for them. They
uh,
very well know what medium they need to use for the brand, how to promote, how everything. But when it comes to for us specifically, you always think that, okay, we will do this later, we will put this out later. It sort of just goes somewhere, and that inhibition needs to go. So I guess if more and more community conversations, more and more memberships, and more confidence building would really help.
great. Shekhar, any tips that you would want to give from your side?
Well, not much tips, but probably if I can, probably three tips, so as to say. So, be on social media to first observe, learn, and then think what new value addition you can bring, because there is an overload of information already there. Uh, well, the second can be that, which again, in my personal opinion, is sustain a long and strong relationship with your influencers and your friends of the brand from the media offline. Everything do not have to be online, as they are
Right.
the content generators, and the friends of the brand goes a long way, whether offline or online, social media or off social media. Then third, probably, which again in my personal opinion is create your own niche in social media with your own learnings and observation. I mean, it can be your own interpretation of a topic, of an industry insight, your own organization culture, or your personal leadership principles. Become a subject matter, as Aparupa said, become a specialist in the first place. And which I always believe is, even before creating a niche on social media, one has to earn the stripes and credibility offline, on ground, right? Social media leverage can only be possible when you have a strong credibility, trust, and to an extent a human approachability offline first. This is true for individual and definitely for the brand you are representing. I think those are the some of the tips, so as to, if I can just state
Sure,
here.
sure. Seema, you just have about a minute or so, so if you could quickly share your tips. Seema, you're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah. So my message to the young communicator community out there is that you have the opportunity to be the leading brand ambassador for your brand. So take it up with confidence. Begin with listening and observing, as Shekhar pointed out. But more importantly, start with resharing your own company news. Share sectoral news to build thought leadership. Begin with reposting general content that you will find in plenty. So you can pick up the content that you can relate with, not anything which is there. And I'll tell you why I'm saying that. If you would look at the Smile, study that we were talking about that Nandita had presented in the morning, in the beginning, you will see that there are actual influencers who have built their influencer base by reposting content that already exists there, and some of them have millions of followers because they're doing that very smartly. And when they're reposting that content, they're also expressing their own opinion about it. So that maybe can come at stage two, but initially I think it's important for you to be there. And third tip that I want to give is that, pick up a cause that is close to your heart and which you think has the power to move others. Get associated with it, build it as your persona. Just these three things, if you start with, I'm sure you'll start enjoying the medium, you'll start enjoying being on social media, and you yourself will block some time on your calendar to be there as a social media influencer.
Great tips, absolutely. Madhavan, can you just share one last tip from your side? What's worked for you? What would you recommend?
Sure. No, I won't talk about what worked for me. Please
Okay,
understand that I come from a different planet. Okay,
sure, sure.
I'm a journalist, thinker, whatever. I'm not a brand communicator. So, but I do observe brand communicators, and my tips to them are as follows. First of all, brand owners and agencies must encourage their staff to take risks. Risk taking is a very important part in social media behavior. So if you are going to not encourage them, think of yourself as a venture capitalist, which basically means you're putting money where there is risk, and you have to pass on the risk and encourage positive risk taking and own up. It doesn't matter if people make mistakes; allow them to make mistakes. The rest of the tips have been very beautifully put by Seema already. The second thing is anybody who can hold a conversation offline is potentially a social media person. Therefore, if they're not doing it, it is because they have been inhibited. So break that inhibition through motivation.
Right. Thank you so much for all your tips and for this wonderfully meaningful discussion today. We would have to end now since we're really out of time, but I appreciate the time that all of you took to come and have this discussion. Thank you again very much, and more power to all of you as influencers and to the public relations and communications industry. I would now like to call Anubhuti to give the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Nandita. Thank you to the panelists for this fabulous discussion. I'm sure all our learners are going away with lots of learnings and tons of inspiration. Big thank you to Aparupa, Madhavan, Seema, and Shekhar for your time and insights today. Thank you to all our attendees for taking the time out this evening. If you have signed up for Praxis, we will look forward to seeing you in Chandigarh on 5th of August. In case you missed signing up for this edition, we will be opening registrations for Praxis to 2023 soon. Follow us at Rep Today Mag on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram for all the updates. Have a lovely evening ahead.